Hello everyone, this is Al Fadi, and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of this series on the search for Muhammad. We also called it the quest for the real Muhammad, or even like Robert Spencer, whom we interviewed during a live stream recently, published a book called Did Muhammad Exist? The idea here is that we are looking at evidence that are either emergent right now or existed in the past, and we're beginning to look at them with a critical eye and a critical mind to evaluate the data that we have in light of also other data that points to northern origin of Islam. For example, the direction of the Qibla, Petra, the possibility that the Quran may have some origins related to the north, or maybe some of its readings at least, and so on and so forth. So now we're really taking a deep dive into the idea that Muhammad, as we know him from the traditional sources, may not be actually the same person based on the evidence or the data that is emerging right now. Now, we want to be clear, myself and Dr. J. Smith, we are dealing with what we know and we understand. As of today, which is December 2020, things could change. And we are open to evaluate any new data and any new evidence. However, it behooves us to share with you what we know to date in order for you to assess what's going on. And with that in mind, I'd like to welcome Dr. J. Smith again. Dr. J, thank you so much for being here with us.
Yep.
I think today we're going to take a look at, or at least we're going to begin to take a look at some of the so-called traditional evidence that supports the existence of the traditional Muhammad, and yet you're going to look at it from a critical standpoint.
Well, I'm going to debunk them. Because anytime you come up with theories, anytime you come up with suppositions, anytime you come up with evidence, you notice everything we've done up to this time has been evidence after evidence after evidence. We've looked at the Quranic Arabic and realized it's the wrong Arabic. The Quranic Arabic is way up north. We've looked at the coins, and we've noticed that all the coins are from up north. And we noticed there's nothing from Mecca, Medina. There is no person named Muhammad that far south. We've looked at all the rock inscriptions, and all the rock inscriptions are from up north. And they are all using this Quranic Arabic, but it's the wrong kind of Arabic for what should have been down in Mecca, Medina, the Sabaic Arabic. And so we've looked at all this, we've looked at the Qira'at, we've looked at the Qurans, we've noticed that all the Qurans, or almost all of them, are coming from up north again. North, 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 north. What's happening down south? What's happening in the Hijaz? What's happening in that part where Muhammad supposed to live, where he grew up, where he received the Quran, where all these events happened that started the emergence of Islam? Where is Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, who are all down in the south, who are all there in Medina? Nothing's happening down there. There's no reference to them at all. So now the rebuttal is that the Muslims are coming back with, we've got you, Mr. Smith, and this is what they're saying they said this to Robert Spencer when he came out with this book. And there was reference after reference. Whoa, what about the Ashtiname Letter? What about the Doctrine of Iacobi? What about the Constitution of Medina? What about the Quran itself? What about the Dome of the Rock? These all have references to Muhammad. These are all from the 7th century. We've got you this time. And so what I'm going to do now is look at every one of those rebuttals, because we've got to look at both sides.
Right.
We want to see what they're saying, what they're coming up with, because there are references to individuals that look like Muhammad, but what I'm going to show you is none of them are Muhammad. And I'm going to show you it isn't from that period, and it is from that place. These things that they're got. Let's start with the first one, and let's go right to the Ashtiname Letter. Let's go ahead and look at the slide, put it up there. You can see it there on the right. Have you seen this letter before? Are you familiar with this?
Well, I mean, I came across, of course, the Ashtiname Letter, known also as a Testament of Muhammad, or Testamentum of Muhammad, and the idea is that it's a letter written by, I think, Ali, it says, and Muhammad is a commissioner of that, and it provides protection to the followers of Christianity. That's the whole idea.
Okay, these monks who live in St. Catherine's Monastery, which is in Egypt, in Sinai desert, that's still there today. This is where the Sinaiticus was found. The Sinaiticus, the famous...
St. Catherine, exactly.
That's right, the same famous manuscript that's from the 4th century of the New Testament, the entire New Testament. Tischendorf found it in the same monastery. They have this letter.
And we have the Arabic Bible also in there.
The Arabic Bible, the Sinaiticus 151, which is reference. It's from 868.
That's right.
The 868, that's the 9th century, and it refers to Jesus in 868 in Arabic as Yeshua.
That's right.
Not Isa.
Not Isa, exactly.
That is hugely important because that shows that the Christians have always known Jesus as Yeshua in Arabic, not Isa. Where does Isa come from? That's a whole other discussion. Nonetheless, in that same St. Catherine's Monastery is this letter. And it's actually, well, it's a copy of this letter. This letter, the original, is up in Istanbul because it was then the Ottomans took it up there in the 16th century. In fact, the earliest we can find of this letter anywhere is in the 16th century, which should be a red flag right there. If you can't find anything earlier than the 16th century, what does that suggest to you right offhand?
Well, I mean, if you cannot find anything before that, that means this could be a redaction, fabrication, you know, just similar.
How about an original from 16th century?
Or an original from that. I mean, it's almost like the Gospel of Barnabas, you know, the idea that it takes you all the way back to Muhammad when in fact it was a 1600.
Or in this case, back to Barnabas.
Right.
If it was Barnabas who was there at the time of Jesus, we know that that's a fraud. Again, it's from Spain, way down south, not from up in the Ottoman Empire, but it's from Spain, and it's also from about the same time as this letter is from. That should show you right away that we're talking about something that's very, very, very late.
Right.
Redacted back, as you say, to the time of Muhammad. In fact, what do you do when you want to redact? You put an image or you put a signature. Notice, look at it. Let's look at the slide again. You notice that hand that is there at the bottom.
Yeah, supposedly it's the hand of Muhammad.
That's the hand of Muhammad. There's the signature of Muhammad, proof that this is authentic, right?
Right.
That immediately says there's a problem here. But let's go through. Let's what now? So when is this attributed to? Look at the slide. It is from St. Catherine's Monastery, promising the protection of these monks and other privileges, which is interesting because the privileges are there completely contradict what we see in the traditions. Again, there's a problem. There seems to be an agenda here. It's dated to 625. So therefore, Muhammad has just moved to Medina in 622.
Right.
He has instituted the caliphate in 624. He has eradicated the Banu Qanuqa family. He has eradicated the Banu Nadir family, and then this is sent. So he's on the warpath against the Jews already. You can see that. And yet he introduces this letter, supposedly that same year. Now take a look at that, and let's look back to the slide. The traditions don't say anything about this. The traditions say no letters were written until 628. So already this is 3 years too early for that. And those letters were only sent to Medina. Only sent to Medina, which means, hold on a minute, he's in Medina. So they're sent to Medina. So obviously there's a problem right there.
Here.
There's confusion there. We do know that Ibn Sa'd in 845 refers to 47 letters that Muhammad wrote. I didn't even know that he could write. Possibly this could be written by his secretary, Zayd ibn Thabit. Nonetheless, we know of 47 writings that he refers to in 845. You're talking the 9th century here. This one is not mentioned among those 47. So if it was such an important letter, why was it not mentioned? And we know of no letter that was sent up to Egypt. What's fascinating is take a look at it again. You see a minaret on the right side there.
Yes.
You see it? There's a minaret there. There's a mosque and there's a minaret there, right? Minarets were not created till the 9th century. So how can you have a minaret there in 625, sorry, in the 7th century?
Yeah.
They were not really used until the 11th century. Boy, I'm catching now what you got. So this is
itching.
This is a historical anachronism right there within the picture. That is visible. Interestingly, it says it uses the reference to Sultan, but that was not used until Mahmud of Ghazna used that between 998 and 1030. That is the 10th and the 11th century. That's
so
350
it's a title,
years.
basically.
It's a title,
yeah.
And that was not used for another 350 years. So there's another historical anachronism. It also mentions a mosque. In fact, it shows one right there. Yet in Egypt, there were no mosques until 641. And then it talks about the Jizyah rate, that it was decided by Christians. Christians deciding their own Jizyah tax?
I've never heard of that, of course.
Is that anywhere in the traditions?
No one wants to pay jizya anyway.
And would you be the one who are imposed upon it? Would you be the one that decides on what you pay? And not only is it illogical, it confronts exactly what the traditions are saying. Notice everything is confronting what the traditions say, and it's confronting history. Let's continue. Look at the slide. It refers to Malak Muqara, which is the angel of proximity. That is a Sufi saying that was first introduced by Mutnabi in 965. That's the 10th century.
That's Al-Mutanabbi. He's a very famous...
340 years, much too late. So can you see? fascinating, it also refers to Christian, Egyptian, and medieval Arabic. This kind of Arabic, and if you look at it, you see it has different kinds of Arabic that are included on that. These were never used down in the Hijaz for one very good reason. There were certainly no Christians that far south. The Egyptians were much too far north to be using that down in the Hijaz. And medieval Arabic doesn't begin to appear until the 9th century. So in every case, these all have to happen after the 9th, 10th, and 11th century. And in this case, fascinating, the demi-laws that are introduced in it began centuries later, such as repairing churches and the forced marriages. So all of this shows that this is a much later rendition. So when do you think this was written? Oh, I kind of give you that answer already.
Well, it appears to be a later writing.
And when 16th century? What was happening in the 16th century? Mahmud was then confronting and attacking the churches.
The Ottoman Empire, exactly.
That's right, and he was known for attacking Christians. These monks living in Egypt realized that they had a problem, and they would get attacked. So clever as they were, they forged this letter, put Muhammad's hand on it, put these other instrumentations to show that it is Islamic, like the mosque and the minaret, without thinking through. They didn't know, being in the 16th century, in the 1500s, they didn't know that these didn't exist till the 11th century. They made all kinds of historical anachronisms, but then the Muslims at that time up in Turkey would not have known any difference anyways, and they accepted it as authentic. Why? Because Muhammad's hand was on it. So in short, the monks in St. Catherine's Monastery in the 16th century needed protection from the marauding Muslims all around them. So they forged this letter and then added Muhammad's name and his hand to give it authority in order to safeguard their monastery. Thus, this is nothing more than an 800-year-old fraud.
Anyone has done, like those who are involved in textual criticism, have they done any dating of this document?
Yes.
Since St. Catherine is rich with many manuscripts.
Here's the problem. In fact, I remember when I first introduced this, I think I introduced it in June of this year or May or July. I think it's up there on my YouTube channel. I was the first one to actually unpack this and show it for it. I don't know how many letters I got back from Christians in the Middle East saying, brother, you're not helping us. This does not help us. We need this letter to protect us even today. And I said, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I'm putting you in danger. I had one lady, she was just yelling at me. She says, do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying one of the few things that safeguards us. And I said, you know, I have to be a historian. I realize that this is not, no one on either side wants me to do this. But I've got to respond to what the evidence is in front of me. I cannot sit there and therefore say that this is not a fraud for your protection. I have to say what this is. It is a fraud. Unfortunately, if Muslims have to use this to stop them from hurting the Christians in Egypt, then I would say that Egypt has a real problem, and so do the Islam have a real problem.
Yeah. And of course, there is the Pact of Omar. That's another questionable document, but that doesn't deal with Muhammad. Of course, it deals with the caliphs, technically speaking, and there's a debate which Omar we're talking about in the first place. But all that to say is that I see your point. You don't want to endorse a fraudulent document just for the purpose of just pretending that it has nothing whatsoever to do with the historicity of the founder of Islam. Okay, well, have you received any pushback on this?
Well, the pushback I get, of course, is from Muslims themselves who are saying, you're just doing this because you're biased. I said, no, take a look at, I'm not using anything. What have I said that's biased in just the last 10 minutes? Where have I gone? I'm using historical evidence. Haven't we said this from the very beginning? We're not interested in what is from the 9th, 10th, 11th. Now we're saying we're not even interested in that what's from the 16th century. We said that about the Kidduts. We're certainly not interested in that what's in the 15th century. We want to know what's in the 7th century. Always, always come back to the 7th century. And we always need to come back to the 7th century, the very beginning of time, because that's the period that we're investigating. And this is not from the 7th century. This is not from 625. It's from the 1500s.
Any person from the field of academia also pushed back on this?
No, no one's pushed back on academia. You can say, how can they? Because what we're doing is academic. We're doing academic research on this. You have to look for historical anachronisms. You have to look for textual criticism, looking and seeing what kind of Arabic is used there. And you can see that the fact that it uses Christian, Egyptian, and medieval Arabic, medieval meaning 9th, 10th, 11th century Arabic, it's much, much too late, and it's much, much too far north.
What are we going to be looking at next time?
Well, next we're going to go into the Doctrina Iacobi, or we're going to do that with Constitution of Medina next, which again gets to the Pact of Omar. The two could be used simultaneously. We're going to look at the Constitution of Medina because Muslims love this one. And they say because this is probably one of the best constitutions that should be used all over the world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I grew up studying that myself.
Okay. That's the next.
Very good. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed this episode and you've been enjoying everything that we have been presenting to you. Until next time, have a blessed day.